Hey guys and girls, my name's Paul, and my friend up here, four-legged mate, his name's VIDEO1. He's going to come along for the ride. Keep an eye on us while we have our little chat. And today I'd like to chat to you about the whole concept of sovereign entities. Now, we've heard a lot over the past few months with all that's been going on with COVID about people claiming to be sovereign entities and all about their rights. Now, before I proceed, just let me say, I'm all for that. I'm in no way against it. Knowing your rights can only be good for you. How you apply it, that's your business, okay? So, it got me thinking, what is a sovereign entity? So, to define sovereign first, okay, sovereign actually means ultimate or supreme power. But in this case, it means ultimate or supreme power of self, not of others, of self. And I also would suggest that there's more to being an ultimate power than just knowing your rights. You would have to be self-reliant, independent. You also have duties and responsibilities. And I would also suggest that when I was wondering, well, okay, that's how I believe a sovereign entity truly is in its big picture. What's the examples of that? And I actually came up with our grandparents. Now, I am 50 runs on the board with a few more, not many, one or two more than 50. So my grandparents were actually born before the year 1900, a long time ago. And this beautiful lady here that I'm about to show you, her name is Pansy. So it wasn't just Hollywood that came up with really cool names. And Pansy, she lived to be 93 years old before she finally left us for the last time and said goodbye. Now, I can assure you, she was as fit as a fiddle and sharp as a tack up until about the last 4 weeks of her life, and then with about 3 weeks left she went into hospital for a bit of extra care and help, and because her body was just getting old and run down. So let's look at why was she 93 and so fit and healthy. Well, it was their lifestyle. They quite literally were independent, self-reliant, and by that I mean, again, we'll have another look at this photo. You can see this grassed area back here that runs all the way down to that fence line where the bushes are. That used to be a vegetable patch. I remember it very well growing up as a young lad. And that vegetable patch there was at least 15 metres long by about 5 to 6 metres wide. And it had row upon row upon row of carefully tended and fastidiously maintained garden beds that were accessed from both sides, path, down, up, down, up, down, up. So they could access everything from both sides. And from where that photo was taken, if you can imagine the person taking the photo behind them, was like a mini orchard, had fig tree, plum tree, apricot tree, which was my favourite. Every year when I used to watch those apricots getting ripe, and when they were ripe, I would climb the tree and sit up there for an hour or so and just gorge on them. Then spend another hour or so on the toilet, but that's a different story. So, there was also rhubarb, or lots of things in that second garden that was behind the photographer. They also had a chook pen. The food from the garden beds that I spoke of was all organic. Now these days, you've got to literally search to find organic stuff. If you don't grow your own, it's really difficult to go find organic specialty produce, and it's pretty expensive too, by the way. That organic produce that they grew, and as you can imagine, 15 metres of garden bed, they grew a lot. They didn't need to go to the supermarket very often. In fact, they only really went to the grocers back then. It was a greengrocer's store because supermarkets hadn't taken off like they have now. and you only got the things you actually couldn't grow and you needed because you couldn't get them yourself. So things like milk, butter, flour, because my grandparents were in town, were the sort of things that they used to have to go buy. But vegetables, they fed a family of 7 plus mum and dad, so there's 9 people. What was left over went to the chooks. And if there was too much for the chooks, what was left over again went into the compost. Now these days, compost has become a fad again. Oh, you compost. Oh, good for you. Well, back in the day, it was just how things were. There was nothing trendy, nothing cool about it. That's what you did, because that's where you get your next year's soil from. Now the chook poo, for example, like you feed the chooks, they then convert it into a bit of poo. The boys every year from the family would have a chore, an annual chore. Go in and shovel out the top layer of dirt, basically, from the chook pen. That was highly regarded fertiliser in the day. Chook poo is actually one of the best fertilisers, to be honest. It's so good you can use too much of it and it'll burn the plants. But that then was put back onto the garden beds, which nurtured the garden beds, which then the next season plants would grow, which would then feed the family, which would then feed the chooks. The chooks would feed the family, and then the chooks would also fertilise the ground, and so the cycle begins. So they were actually the original hippies before being a hippie was made really cool and trendy by the hippies. And in fact, they did it decades before it was cool. They were also great recyclers. Now, I can remember even in my day, we didn't throw away things like we do now. And I've got to say, hey, I'm as guilty. I've learned bad habits over the time too. Quite guilty. But back in the day, even my day, you didn't just throw things away. You actually thought, well, okay, there's potential use out of this later on. I'm not sure what now. That will reveal itself when the time comes. So you kept it, you stored it. If you go past a farmer of a decent age, so I'm 50 plus, so if you're talking older than me, you'll probably find there's a little dedicated patch in the house paddock, or even a small corner in the paddock next to the house, that is literally a lay-down yard. And a lay-down yard is where you just store stuff that may have a use later on, that you can cannibalise item A to help maintain item B so that it has a longer life, more duration. So with that, I then started to think, well, okay, our grandparents may have been onto something, but because every generation feels the need to reinvent the wheel and no one's done it but us, we tend to, be rid of the knowledge of that's been proven, okay, that worked. I would suggest to you that if we're a really intelligent society, we would pick the best bits out and bring them along for the journey for the next generation. So with that in mind, I'm going to pick the best bits out of some of their sayings and idioms over the next few weeks in small 5 to 10 minute videos. And we're going to call it Sargaceous Sundays. Sargaceous, what the hell's that? Well, sargaceous is to have sharp discernment or good mental discernment and keen thinking, basically, in a nutshell. There's probably a little bit more to it, but not much. So with my Sargaceous Sundays videos, we're going to look at some little sayings and just explore how they're actually based in a lot of wisdom and even spirituality, even though they may not have realised it at the time. So with that in mind, I would invite you all to join us for Sargaceous Sundays, where we explore white fella law. And law, L-O-R-E, is defined as knowledge and wisdom passed down generation to generation by word of mouth. So what we're doing is literally reviving white fella law. And I hope you enjoy it. I may even bring back some memories of what your parents or grandparents used to share with you and say to you. And we'll see where that leads. So thank you very much, and don't forget to like and even share these videos to your friends. They may be interested. And even subscribe in the subscribe button down below. So I look forward to seeing you next Sunday for the very first installment of Sagacious Sundays, where we explore a very, very well-known saying. And if you haven't heard of it, you've been living life as an ostrich with your head in the sand. So, see you in a week. Ciao for now.